Welcome to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's Ottoman Greeks of the United States Digital History Project's Remembering 1922 video series. In this and all upcoming episodes of the series, the names of the interviewees have been coded to protect their identity. This episode, like the 8th episode of our series, continues presenting the experiences of expulsion and escape from Izmir and its surrounding towns and villages. We begin this episode with Maria, who recalls details related to the repercussions of her grandfather's avoidance of conscription into the Ottoman army, and her grandmother's experience of escape from Alachata.
He refused to fight against the Greeks, so they killed him. And she had 4 children, that were like stepping stones. And the youngest was an infant. I think by that time the family had left, and they were, because he didn't believe that what was going to happen. But the rest of the family had gone, so there she was with the children. She had taken, my grandmother told me this so many times, she had taken whatever money or jewelry or gold she had and stuffed it in the baby's diaper and was leaving town with her other 3 kids. And the Turkish soldier went by and smacked the baby on the bottom as they were leaving and heard the jingling of the money and grabbed the baby from her arms. And her dilemma was, she goes after the baby, he kills her, and then her children are orphaned. But she couldn't, in good faith, just let him take her. So what happened was, this is what my grandmother said, she watched him as he took her, and I guess he took whatever, the jewelry, the gold, whatever she had, and he took it and left the baby on the sand. And she said she watched till the baby was the size of the head of a pin. That's how she described it. That's how far away the baby was. And when it became dusk, she went and retrieved her. So the baby was okay, the other kids were okay, but her husband had died.
In addition to her grandparents, Maria recalled a graphic episode involving her uncle.
Another brother who was about 12, I think, or 12 or 13 at the time, the girls were throwing themselves in wells to get away from the Turks. They had the 12-year-old pulling the bodies out. The first one he pulled out was his cousin, but she hadn't died yet because she was on the top.
Another example of families escaping from Izmir's surrounding towns and villages is provided by Nikki. Her family escaped from Urla. Nikki begins by lamenting her father's and his family's fate.
He was born in riches, in velvet and lace and gold and silver and chandeliers and those Persian carpets, and, filthy rich. And he ended up, in 40 days, his whole life changed from 10 to 0. He ended up in Piraeus in a tent as a refugee with his mother, her sister, and his aunt from his father's side.
Nikki's grandfather took an unusual path of escape and experienced a more tragic outcome.
Now, when they got in the ship, it was those 4 women that got on the ship, and my grandfather we have it in Greece, a red pouch, with 1,000 golden coins. So instead of giving it to his wife, he gave it to his sister. take care of my wife and my child. And he took all the cattle, stupid idea, and his workers, and I don't know what else he wanted to bring to Greece, and he started going north of Smyrna to go through Constantinople and pass into Thrace, but we don't know what happened. He probably got slaughtered, because the only men they were telling that were alive and went to Greece were the ones who dressed up as women and got on the ships, and that's how those men arrived in Greece. All the other men, the Turks slaughter merciless.
Nikki then offered her grandmother's last recollection of Izmir.
September 10, 15, about that time. Oh, and my grandmother told me that they were crying because they would see the fire, the fire in Smyrna.
Nikki concludes with a memory of her grandmother, her father, and his siblings settling in Greece, first in an Athenian refugee camp and then in Elassona.
They told me that it was awful. They didn't know, where they were going, what they were going to do. They felt helpless, depressed, and I don't know if I don't know how she fed my father, but I know that had an enormous impact on my father's psychological and health in general. So then they told me that they moved them to Elassona. There, the government gave them houses. I was born in a Turkish house, which had no windows on the outside, had an inner court, an inner yard, and it had two large rooms, one kitchen. It had like a patio, and across from that it was a storage place, and where my mother did the washing. So that's what his grandmother got. My grandmother got another house, and they even offer her, now this my father told me, they even offer her downtown Elassona a lot of stores to take, and she refused. She took money. So then they also gave them a lot of land, so they can cultivate and live. So we had a lot of property from my great-grandmother, because she left everything to us because we took care of her.
Tina, whose family resided in Izmir proper, offers a detailed recollection of her family's time at the quay in September of 1922.
That they were in a warehouse, that ships wouldn't take them, just like today. They didn't want to accept, various nations didn't want to accept refugees and bring them back to their country. My mother was born in Malta, and so was her oldest sister. And the British were willing to take the two girls, and my grandmother said, no, the family stays together. With all the soot and ash in the air, and they were in the warehouse. My aunt, who was the oldest, born in 1900, was rather Rubenesque. And of course that was a sign of affluence. You had food to eat. She and a friend of hers wanted to go to the water fountain outside the wharf, someplace in the square, to wash themselves off. And my grandmother said, look out, if the Turks see you, I will not see you again. Well, they went, and sure enough, a Turk spied them. And they ran back into the warehouse. Supposedly, my grandmother had a carpet, and she rolled up my aunt in the carpet and sat on it. I don't know if this is my youngest aunt, but she was like, what, maybe 7 years old at the time. She says, I never heard that story. Anyway, my mother, who was 18, recalled that story. The Turk came into the warehouse where they were all camped out, all bunch of people, and he noticed a woman putting coins in her bosom. And so he was distracted and went and got the coins and then left. I also remember that finally a Greek ship accepted my grandmother and the 3 girls. And my grandmother's heel of her shoe got caught in the planks going up to the ship. And I think she kind of lost the grip on my youngest aunt. But then, you know, they all came to Athens. My aunt, the only thing she said was, I remember the bloated bodies floating in the harbor.
Like Tina, Matthew also recalled his family's harrowing escape from the quay in September of 1922.
Her brother, and her little sister went to the port with, you know, basically nothing, thinking that, okay, well, we're at the port, here are all the ships, you know, we're coming, they're going to come get us, and at least when we get out of this hell, you know. They were shocked that the boats would not come to pick them up, because they could not understand. It's like, don't you see? Don't you understand what's happening? Don't you see? Of course, you know, you see you're kind of like at this queue there on the front, and then you see, you know, this huge fire and it's burning, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, you know, the only way to get out is the sea, you know. So, yeah, as I was saying, people would jump in the sea, try to make it to the boats. Most of them got shot as they were kind of like swimming. But even the ones that would make it to the boats, they would be kind of like they would not be accepted there. These were foreign ships, Navy ships that were there, but their orders were not to take anybody, which was, you know, and the Greek ships were nowhere to be seen. So there was, you know, like this fear and uncertainty that there is basically that they have been abandoned by everybody, you know, and they were at the mercy of this. She called them the chetes, and she would differentiate them from the tactical Turkish army. She said they were the ones that were doing most the damage, because they were like fanatic Muslims, and they were out there to basically get rid of anybody who is Christian and wipe them off. While the tactical army, they had to at least pretend like they had some rules, you know, that they were following kind of like the international rules. But she saw a woman getting her finger cut off by a Turk to get her golden ring that she had. She saw a man get bitten off to death practically, you know. The Turks were using that they were going around looking through your stuff. What did you have? Because they were looking for like gold coins, and everybody must have all this stuff. So they would go through everything, you know, to just basically steal whatever was worthwhile stealing. Even teeth, even golden teeth. She said that they would take. And finally, after there were like 3 days on the promenade there in Smyrna, until finally the American ship came. They were able to get on. And they went to Chios, and she said that they were. I remember that they were so hungry that they cooked, the people there that would help them out, they cooked a big pot of spaghetti. You know, the spaghetti on the boil. And I suppose who cared about plates, and then they were eating the spaghetti with their hands right off from the heated water. I mean, that's kind of like how hungry they were, and that. And eventually, from here, they were shipped to Thessaloniki, where there was a more organized program for the refugees, and at first it was the kataskinosi, but then they gave them a piece of land, a piece of property to build their own house, which was more of a paranga, which is actually the place where she lived all of the rest of her life.
Finally, Helen's family exemplifies an experience of temporary settlement in Greece before migrating to the United States.
My father's brother, who was the lawyer, worked at the French embassy. He was able to get them papers. And he convinced them that they had to leave. And there was a French ship in the harbor, and they had to leave. And it was my paternal grandmother, my father's mother. It was his two brothers. It was their sister, my mother, the two girls, and my mother's mother. They left. My mother and my grandmother and the two girls left the house to go down to the harbor to get on the ship. And my mother remembered that they didn't bring any money with them. So my grandmother gave her the keys to their house, and she ran back to the house and was able to get a bag of gold coins and ran back and caught up with them, and they went on down to the harbor. And they met up, they met at some, I do believe they went to a friend of theirs who was British. They all met at his house because my grandfather was there too. And so they all decided they were going to leave together. My father's father refused to leave. He said that this has happened before, it's going to blow over, and I'm staying. So apparently he stayed, but eventually, I don't think it was terribly long, but they said, no, it's not gonna, it's not gonna blow over, you need to leave. And somehow or another, on another ship, some other way, because they had property and a house in Thessaloniki too, and he finally went there. But he didn't travel with them at a different time. So they were able to get on this ship, and the ship, like I said, went to Bizerta in North Africa. My mother would never eat beans because she said that's all they ever fed them was beans on the ship, and they were on that ship more than 10 days, I think she said. Every Friday we had to have bean soup because we were fasting, right? She would never eat. She made it, but she never ate it because it reminded her of the beans that was all they got to eat coming across there. And from there, they went to Piraeus. In the meantime, my father landed in Athens and Piraeus, and he sent a telegram to my mother's sister in New York and said, they're all gone, they're all dead, I saw the city burning, etc., In the meantime, my mother sent her sister a telegram and said, we're in North Africa, so-and-so is with us, we're going to arrive in Athens at such and such a date. My aunt telegraphs my father back and says the ship is going to dock at such and such a date and time, be there. And that's how they ended up getting together. They were engaged at the time, and as soon as they could, they were married in the cathedral there in Piraeus. But anyway, they got married on November the 29th of 1922. And then they all went to Thessaloniki, And my father decided that, that they were, he and his mother got into an altercation, is my understanding. Because he said that he wanted to come to, the United States. They wanted him to stay because they would be able to go back and blah, blah, blah. And he said no. So they went to Marseille, and they had to wait for their number to come up before they could leave. So they were there for 9 months. My mother was pregnant with my brother. They left in July, and they told them that she was only 7 months pregnant when they got on the ship. But she was ready to deliver any day. And so they got into New York, and he was born on the 8th of August. And that's how they got to the U.S., through the sponsorship.
In this and the 8th episode, we were reminded of the catastrophic conditions under which residents of Izmir and its proximal towns and villages escaped. That escape began in September 1922 and continued to the end of November. In both episodes, we heard stories of loss and trauma that continue to reverberate in the memories of their descendants today. Some were from wealthy and privileged families, others were middle and lower class, and some experienced downward mobility as a result of their refugee experience. The next episode will focus on their settlement in Greece, and specifically, their reception by the local populations. The researchers at the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program's Ottoman Greeks of the United States Digital History Project would like to thank you, our listeners, for your support of this important research. We look forward to your comments and hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed producing it. See you next time.